This is Thinker Be Eaten, and Larry the Contractor Guy is back with us. We're going to hit part 7 of We Are What We Hated. And Larry, where are we going to pick up with this particular segment?
Well, I wanted to talk about the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and its origins, how it was related to and really, in a way, part of the old Third Reich, and how it's in the headlines today, and it's pretty apropos to talk about them when we're talking about Nazism.
The reason I asked you that too is that organization was it not birthed during the First World War or pre-World War I?
It actually started officially in 1928 with Hassan al-Banna. He was a school teacher and a bit of an intellectual, and strangely enough, a Freemason and an adherent of Sufism. So there again, we see the secret society showing up.
Okay. I still find it very interesting that there was any kind of a thread between Germany and I guess at that time the Ottomans and this situation. I mean, okay, religiously there's nothing there between them, and that probably didn't mean a whole lot. I guess with a certain worldview and political ideologies, in fact, there probably was something there that allowed what I would call two disparate cultures, in a sense, to bond.
Well, strange that you say that. No, it's not really strange, because I know you've been saying that quite a bit, and I was trying to get into tracking the origins so that we could, get a little closer definition of that, a little better focus on it. And I came up with an article by a fellow named, he's actually an MD, Robert Mock, and it's called The Mufti of Jerusalem and the Muslim Brotherhood, the Fight to Own Jerusalem and the Land of Israel. Mm-hmm. At any rate, in there, he has a quote from a man named Peter Hopkirk in Global Nazism and the Muslim Brotherhood, Indicators of Connections. At any rate, it says, and I quote, "The common origins of the Muslim Brotherhood and the Nazis began in the 1830s. Right. It was September 1835, and the Prussian captain, Count Helmuth Karl Bernhard von Moltke, was sent to the service of the court of the Ottoman Empire as an advisor to the Turkish army. Along with his entourage of German intellectuals, the German Oriental scholars began pouring the lands of the Middle East, searching for the great empires of the ancient world. Count Helmuth von Moltke later became the military architect of the German unification wars and served as chief of the Prussian General Staff from 1857 to 1888. His observations of the Middle East soon caught the eye of Kaiser Wilhelm II, who coveted the imperial power of the British and sought to gain influence in the Middle East in the 1890s. As he pushed for hegemony against the power influence of the British, the acceleration for the outbreak of World War I began. At this time, the Kaiser ordered, and I quote, "Our councils and agents must inflame the entire Muslim world against this hateful, lying, and unscrupulous nation," in England. Dr. Mock goes on to say, on the heels of the humiliation of defeat of Kaiser Wilhelm's Second Reich, there arose a new determination of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, with their new leader, Adolf Hitler. He would resurrect the Germans to the glory of a new Germany in the Third German Reich. It was their goal to conquer Europe and Great Britain and take control of the mysterious land of the Ottomans for the great and noble Aryan race of Germany. In this military ferment came the union of Nazis of Germany and the Muslim Brotherhood of Egypt. The central core of this brotherly bond was the intense hatred for the Jewish people. And then he goes on with an opinion, which I share, and he says, with a little spiritual insight, we can see the finger of the divine as he resurrects the parties that will play out the chess game for the future control of the world.
Well, now that you mention it, I know that France, Germany, and Britain did a lot of, I don't know, I wouldn't say instigation, but at least trying to get some kind of sway there. And I assume that attempt at colonization, if there was such a thing going to happen, or at least the three of them wanting to be there, so not any one of the three could get the whole 9 yards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it stayed there. Quigley covers that too, and I believe that for as much as Quigley tells us the truth about Rhodes and that, that his chronicle of that in that one book of his, Tragedy and Hope, covers that. Because there was a time when, I guess it was Iraq, was tripartite with all three countries being in there. Mm-hmm. And the one thing they were happy about is that the trains worked on time. So, but that was, we don't think too much about what took place in the 19th century, but that did obviously lay a lot of the foundation for what it eventually would become a big situation in World War I and even later in World War II.
Yeah, I think the problem for Britain and France was that Germany, being such a powerful country, once it unified, both militarily and industrially, Germany was jealous of what the British and the French had, especially the British, as that quote says, and they wanted to expand, and the British were in their way, and they wanted to take what the British had and be the top power in Europe, which Britain was at that time, and Kaiser Wilhelm was determined to do that, and so I think that's when he started eyeing the Ottoman world, wanting it to be his own. I was going to start talking about the Muslim Brotherhood in today's world, and this is from the London Telegraph. Damien McElroy is the writer, and I quote, "The Muslim Brotherhood, Egypt's largest Islamic movement and the founder of Hamas, has set up a network of political parties around the country that eclipse the following of the middle-class activists that overthrew the regime." He writes, "On the extreme fringe of the Brotherhood, Islamic groups linked to al-Qaeda are organizing from the mosque to fill the vacuum left by the collapse of the dictatorship. Although the leading contenders for Egypt's presidency are independents, many have begun wooing the Muslim blocs. Frontrunner Amir Musa, the Arab League president, has conceded that it's inevitable that Islamic factions will be the bedrock of the political system." And in another article entitled "Islamist Group is a Rising Force in the New Egypt," in the New York Times of March 24, 2011, Michael Slackman says, "It is also clear that the young, educated, secular activists who initially propelled the non-ideological revolution are no longer the driving political force, at least not at the moment. As the best organized and most extensive opposition movement in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood was expected to have an edge in the contest for influence, but what surprises many is its link to a military that vilified it. There is evidence that the Brotherhood struck some kind of a deal with the military early on," said Elijah Zarwan, a senior analyst with the International Crisis Group. "It makes sense if you're the military. You want stability and people off the street. The Brotherhood is one address where you can go to get 100,000 people off the street." And another quote from a person there in Egypt, "We're all worried," says Amir Koura, a 55-year-old television producer reflecting the opinions of the secular minority. "The young people have no control of the revolution anymore. It was evident in the last few weeks when you saw a lot of bearded people taking charge. The youth are gone." The Muslim Brotherhood is also regarded warily by some religious Egyptians who see it as an elitist secret society. These suspicions have created potential opportunities for other parties. In the early stages of the revolution, the Brotherhood was reluctant to join the call for demonstrations. It jumped in only after it was clear that the protest movement had gained traction. Throughout, the Brotherhood kept a low profile, part of a survival instinct honed through decades of suppression by the state. Well, as you can see here, that this so-called spontaneous revolution in Egypt is being taken over by radical Islam, by the Muslim Brotherhood, and we can go on with in the statement that he made in the article about it being a secret society. I think there's a great deal of evidence that's true, and that secret society is is part and parcel of the secret societies, which we talked about early on in this series. In particular, Sufism is a manifestation of Islam that is mystical. That the Muslim Brotherhood is associated with. Is what I'm trying to say. In fact, there are people who say that Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri, the number 1 and 2 guys in Al-Qaeda, were Sufis. I'm not really sure about that, but I think there's a lot of evidence about Zawahiri, but bin Laden, I'm not sure. At any rate, I'd like to read from an article called Kabbalah, Freemasonry, the Tijaniya Order, the Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, and Sufism. Got all the food groups in there.
Yeah, exactly. Holy mackerel.
At any rate, it's written by a man named S. Amir Ali. I assume is an Arab. I just found the article, and it's really a good one. It gives a pretty good overview. The Sufis are the main mystical manifestation of Islam. Although its acceptability to Orthodox Muslims has always been essential to the function of Sufism as an inner tradition within Islam, there remains speculation that its origins lie in much older Near Eastern mystical traditions, perhaps even dating back to ancient Egypt. Many Sufi orders continue to be very influential within Orthodox Sunni Islam. For example, the Tijaniya order is strongly associated with the Muslim Brotherhood, which began as an anti-British movement in Egypt in the 1920s, later playing an important role in the revolution which deposed King Farouk in 1952. Many of the features which made Sufism so successful as an underground occult organization, for example, the secret recognition of codes and cell structure, helped the Muslim Brotherhood function effectively as a terrorist organization and spy network, as with Western Freemasonry. However, it seems likely that in many cases any esoteric aims have long since been submerged by political objectives. Unlike Christianity, ceremonial magic has a legitimate place in Islam. According to Islamic law, shir al-halal, or permitted magic, may be used as a vehicle for religious discovery. This has given the Sufis room to preserve magical practices from the ancient world, which were systematically suppressed in Europe, which had to wait for the Renaissance for their reintroduction. Like Kabbalah, Sufi ideas played an important part in the European Renaissance, in particular being hugely influential on the Rosicrucian movement. In terms of esoteric practice, there is also a large overlap between Kabbalistic and Sufi magical practice. Hardly surprising when one considers the related languages, geographical proximity, and common religious heritage. Like Kabbalists, Sufis have always sought to maintain their legitimacy within mainstream religion. Like Kabbalists, they maintained an intellectual tradition in continuity from the Hellenistic culture of the last few centuries. And here's where it gets really interesting. There are also some similarities which both refuse to acknowledge. The practice of demonic magic, summoning and binding demons, has a central role in the magic of both traditions. This doesn't sit easily with modern Sufis, who like to stress the more image-friendly spiritual development side of their tradition. Where have we heard that before? Nevertheless, demonic magic is probably one of the most ancient threads in the Sufi tapestry, dating back to the ancient Canaanite, Babylonian, Egyptian cultures. Many medieval grimoires, which marked the point at which demonology entered Western Europe, contain lists of demons with names directly traceable to these traditions. When, in drum roll please, Aleister Crowley restored the invocation of the Bornless One, he found good correlations between the nonsense names contained in the Greco-Coptic original and Egyptian god forms, correspondences borne out by the context of the ritual. Thanks to the Golden Dawn's adoption of the Tree of Life, the influence of Kabbalah on Western ceremonial magic is highly visible. However, the no less significant influence of Sufism has all but been ignored. As well as the invisible influence of the Rosicrucians, it seems likely that Crowley was also heavily influenced by Sufi ideas. He spoke Arabic and traveled extensively in many areas where Sufis practiced. And he was also fond of that least tangible means of Sufi teaching, the self as paradox. Crowley, like so many Sufis before him, was not scared to contradict himself regularly, to cheat his pupils of their savings while lecturing them on the importance of honesty, to marry his friend's sister to save her from choosing between two lovers. The regressive nature of modern thelema may be judged by the fact that this important, even central aspect of Crowley's teaching is still widely ignored in favor of his boring and often inaccurate pronouncements on magic in books with impressive-sounding titles. And it says here, for God's sake, wake up.
Well,
much of the well-known mystical symbolism of Sufism, often best known through the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, was taken over by the Ismailis. They joined Sufism and Shiaism in a peculiar and a unique blend, often appearing as a particular group of Sufis with their own sheikh. It would not be surprising if the use of hashish and other drugs for achieving mystical ecstasy was also carried over by the Sufis. This is from Edward Berman's The Assassins, the Holy Killers of Islam. And in that book, he kind of traces the idea of the assassins and their role in Islam. And I believe that the Muslim Brotherhood is really a kind of a modern-day equivalent of that. See, we go on here. The theology and politics of the revolutionary genius Hassan Isaba can be seen in the fact that his first original creation, both religious and political, of a specifically Persian ethos after the conquest of the country of the Arabs and consequent conversion to Islam. In this wider sense, the thought and doctrines of the inventor of the assassins may be said to have been an enduring influence in the religious and political life of the Middle East. This legacy is shared by both the Aga Khans and by contemporary revolutionary groups in Lebanon and Persia. I need to add here that Hassan Isaba was the guy that inspired the tradition of the old man of the mountains. The idea was that he created a sect of assassins that would do his will by, he would bring young guys into, young men, I guess in their late teens, into a garden, and they would get high on hashish, and then these beautiful girls would come out, and they would dally with them. And they were told that if they went out and did the bidding of the group of Mr. Saba, that which would be to assassinate certain political figures that they were against. If they did his bidding, then they could come back and they would spend their rest of their time in paradise with these young girls. Seems to be a bit of a scam, I should say.
Seems like a lot of work too.
What's that?
Seems like a lot of work too. All right.
Yeah. At any rate, in fact, it seems like some things I remember from the 60s anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go on. The real problem, the Ismailis in general and the Zari Ismailis, or assassins in particular, is that they were always considered heretical and persecuted by official Islam, except for the period in which Ismailism was the official religion under the Fatimid caliphs in Egypt. The consequence of this is that no comprehensive formula of the Assassin's Creed was ever generally recognized. Their doctrines were maintained in secrecy by the assassins themselves, while their enemies were content to dismiss them as heretical without studying or reporting them. Here's part of the occult tradition they're talking about here. Kadula is the Arabic word meaning abandoner or forsaker. Kadula is a type of spiritual force that powers the practices of Tafrid and Jafrid. These are exercises that are used to transcend or abandon normal cultural programming. The idea is that by transcending or abandoning dogma and fixed beliefs, a person can see reality as it is. Kadula is stimulated by the nafs, breath of the soul, and the stimulated abandoner then causes the hal, or spiritual state. Kadula appears in the Quran in book 25, verse 29. The verse translates as mankind. Shaitan is al-Kadula. They have explained two orthodox interpretations of this verse to me. The first is that Shaitan will abandon man. The other is that Shaitan causes men to forsake Islam and his culture. You'll note that this second interpretation is fairly consistent with the spiritual meaning the ancient Mukabaran give Kadula. Obviously, an Orthodox Muslim would think Kabaran practices are sinful. This verse in the Quran is important because it links the abandoner, Kadula, with Shaitan, the old dragon, Lord of the Abyss. And this is from Parker Ryan, the Necronomicon and Ancient Arab Magic. I think that last sentence where it says the abandoner is linked with Shaitan, the old dragon, Lord of the Abyss, kind of gives you a very good indication where that came from, and that would be Satan in just from an Islamic viewpoint.
You're shaking my cobwebs here because I was listening to Andy Senior's Radiola.
Yeah.
With those songs, from jazz from, the beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Into about the middle. And one of the songs was about the old man in the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about it, and I wrote to him, I said, because there were two songs in his group that he put up in one of the hours a week or so ago. Because he runs these kind of thematic, radio shows.
Mm-hmm.
They revolve around something. Like he just did one kind of with the end of the world stuff that was going down on yesterday, if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in this one, it seemed vaguely, when I heard the song, I was thinking, could a Creedence Clearwater kind of ripped a little bit from that for the song "The Old Man Lives Down the Road"?
Mm-hmm.
And Andy, said, well, that might have been, but what he was saying was that, and he talked about this as being a reference to just what you're talking about. If I could dig that song out, I'll use it as an outro because, interestingly, after a while, doesn't it get kind of like obvious, Larry, that like all roads lead to the same place?
Exactly.
I mean, really, it does,
And it doesn't matter which culture it is. It doesn't matter which nation it is. It's always leading back to satanic machinations.
And yet, I have to say this. I mean, we look at a culture. In fact, I was watching Brotherhood, the one that Costner put out.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's hard to hold down solid food because Kevin has this tendency to, like, rewrite history.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to admit,
and he's not the greatest actor in the world either.
I tell you what, I'll give him an A on that. I don't know.
I liked him in Open Range, but I'm a big fan of westerns.
Yes. Yeah, that was good. I never heard guns so loud in my damn life.
Yeah, I was in the theater, and my son and I were about blown out of there. It's like somebody shooting a .45 right behind your head.
And talking about how all roads lead to the same place, who was an extra in that movie except Charles T. Wilcox?
Yeah. Is that right?
He was,
I didn't know that.
Yes, he was. He was down at the end of the bar in the barroom scene.
Is he an actor?
He's everything.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean he's an artsy kind of guy. I mean, he's an author, and they brought that into his town.
Well, darn.
And he showed up, and he said Costner was a really great guy. He said, he would talk to people. There were a lot of aspiring actors there, and Costner was more than willing to give him some time. So apparently he's a good guy. I
have heard that he is a decent guy. I've heard that from more than one source.
Now, conversely, when Russell Crowe came up there for Mystery Alaska, wasn't that the hockey thing?
Yeah.
He got thrown out of one bar, barred out of another. So throwing ashtrays, easy, Russell.
I don't know what his problem is, but if I had that kind of money, I don't think I'd be going into bars and starting fights. But hey,
No, but Russell's main problem was Russell. So.
Yeah.
But at any rate, that we would talk about all these things, though. But going back to Andy with that song he had, and I'll try to find that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, and when I was going back with the Robin Hood thing was this. There was a time, apparently, when Europe really wasn't all that astute academically.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the commingling of Europeans with Middle Easterners,
mm-hmm.
where who got the better of the deal?
Well, there was a time when the Arabs were way advanced in mathematics.
Yes. What I always loved the line, do you think that the Freemasons could have built stuff with Roman numerals? No, they needed geometry, and guess who had that?
Right.
So you look at that culture swap, and obviously, clearly, Europeans got the better of the deal. But then you also wonder in time, what allowed the Middle East to, I guess, still keep this relationship going with what they must have at least perceived in the beginning as barbarians.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, and I'm not deep enough in that, but clearly there had to be some kind of connection. And I would have to say it's probably through the patience of Islam and the Arab nations that there was something, a conduit was still kept for all those centuries.
Yeah, one thing, of course, there were bad guys among the Muslims, really bad guys, just like there were amongst the, quote, Christians, I should say the Roman Catholic people that were sent down during the Crusades. But one thing that the Muslims were totally freaked out about the Crusaders was that they were prone to killing everybody. You know, it was like women, children, elderly people. You know, everybody they would kill, and the Muslims considered that to be insanity and evil. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they're right on that count.
Yeah.
You know, and they were brutal toward their enemies. You know, but they mainly confined it to, you know, men who were combatants, you know.
Right. It was men against men, and everything
Yeah,
else is just considered, you know, yeah.
And I'm not saying that all the Christian, or I shouldn't say Christians, all the Crusaders, you know, were evil, intent on killing innocents, because I don't think they all were. But, you know, there was a lot of that going on because of the fanaticism involved. And a lot of that had to do with the Vatican had people running around in Europe recruiting people for the Crusades, and they would portray an image of the Muslims as being the most evil, you know, just like devils, you know, and we've got to go down there and clear them out and take Jerusalem back, and these people are evil, and we've got to, you know, get rid of them, and they pump people up to the point where they wanted to kill everybody. And of course they, you know, they were prone to killing the Jews as well as the Muslims. So, you know, that's kind of a time-honored tradition from Europe.
Well, you know, without going deep into this, all right, we'll just make reference to it. I mean, if people are interested, they can go to, I would think one of the best sources for this is what Walter Veith has done.
Mm-hmm.
But he documents the fact that for the most part, the Vatican allowed Islam to exist, just as long as they didn't harm the hairs of any Roman Catholics. Jews and Protestants, not a big deal, but leave the Roman Catholics alone. And no matter how much that might incense somebody, still in all, there's enough information there to the fact that in fact was true, that the Vatican just looked the other way when Islam was burgeoning. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I mean, that kind of makes sense to me. And then, of course, we have, in the 1570s, I think when the Ottoman Empire was making too many incursions, or too deep an incursion into Eastern Europe, and that's when they had the Sea Battle of Lepanto, when the Vatican had a navy at that time, and summoned other navies, and they went up against the Ottoman Empire and repelled it. Probably one of the first of what might be three, I guess, rejections of their continued efforts to get into Europe. Mm-hmm. And finally, I would say that the third one was World War I. Mm-hmm. And that was the end of it. But
well, I know that I think there was a Muslim incursion into Europe, and they were approaching Vienna.
Yes.
And I think that was as late as maybe the 1600s. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Probably 1300s. But at any rate,
well, you know,
they were pushed back there.
And also that also entails the whole story about Dracul, or Vlad the Impaler.
Oh, yeah.
That's
involved.
Right. I mean, it's a rich piece of history, which you and I think we can admit, are deficient in. But boy, is it really interesting stuff.
It really is. I haven't had a chance to really, you know, delve into it that deeply, but
I'm wondering,
it is interesting. There's no doubt.
I'm just wondering what the benefit was, you know, for the Sufis, for the Muslim Brotherhood, for the more radical groups that might have been down there at the time, to want to hitch their wagon necessarily with any one of the three powers on the European continent, which would have been Britain, Germany, and France. Do you have any insight into that? I mean,
well, I think the real lure for them was that they agreed very much on who their enemies were, and those were the Jews and the Brits, and that's really the driving force behind it. I've got a couple other things here to say about the Sufis, and
Sure.
I'll get off that subject. At least part of the veneration of Sinan was based on his well-attested powers of telepathy and clairvoyance, such as the cases reported by Abu Faras of him answering questions thought outside his window. Hassan-i-Saba himself was renowned in his own day as an alchemist. That the assassins engaged in what would now be described as occult practices seems therefore to be beyond doubt. The sciences of alchemy and astrology were then part of philosophical studies. That was from Edward Bourbon and the Assassin's Holy Killer of Islam. Here's the final quote I've got here that I find to be the most interesting, and this is attributed to S. Amir Ali. From the Ismailis, the Crusaders borrowed the conception which led to the formation of all the secret societies, religious and secular, of Europe. The institutions of the Templars and Hospitallers, the Society of Jesus, formed by Ignatius Loyola, composed by a body of men whose devotion to their cause can hardly be surpassed in our time. The ferocious Dominicans, the milder Franciscans may all be traced either to Cairo or to Alamet. Alamet was where the assassins lived. The Knights Templar especially, with their system of Grand Masters, Grand Priors, and religious devotees, and their degrees of initiation, bear the strongest analogy to the Eastern Ismailis. Well, that kind of lends more credence to the idea that that is where the Templars came from. That is, the Templars were influenced by the Muslims, and especially Sufism and that secret society, which brought about the assassins, and that there is a correlation there, and that's part of the situation too with the Muslim Brotherhood, is that, and in hooking up with the Nazis and you know, certain other elements, they're just hooking up with their brothers, with people who you know, are in league with the same spiritual forces that they're in league with.
Do you, not to get preachy about this, but do you remember vaguely what Scripture says in Genesis about what turned out to be the Arab nation? I guess we could call that East of Eden, perhaps?
Yeah, it says something to the effect, it talks about them being wild asses.
I would have sold for donkeys, but that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
It said
ASSES, as in jackass, yeah. I don't mean to be using profanity, but...
Look who you're talking to. No, it's okay. I'm kidding with you.
I know, but,
Stop.
you know, I can't... You know, I don't want to do it myself.
I feel like the Joan Rivers of these talk shows. Yeah, it said, well, Ishmael was born out of rebellion on the part of Abraham.
Sure.
He slept with Hagar, right?
Who was an Egyptian woman.
Is that right?
Yeah, she
All
was
right.
an Egyptian. The Bible tells you that.
And that was a handmaiden because he didn't think that's...
Right.
Sarah, was it Sarah?
Yeah. He wanted to have a son.
And he didn't think Sarah could bear her.
And due to her age, he didn't think she could bear him a son, so he
was helping out God, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. He was committing a terrible sin. He was, you know, adultery is you know, not a good thing, and he went ahead and did it anyway. And of course, he loved the boy, and it created enmity within his family.
No, and the Lord said to him, you know, like, did you not think I could make pretty much good on my promise? You know, and Abraham did not credit the Lord for being able to do whatever he wished to do, no matter how old Sarah was.
Yeah,
and
he had a lack of faith.
That's right. And like I said, helping out God, which is something I touched upon in Stuff and Things 8, where it says you don't know him. I'm so sick and tired of hearing about how people are going to help out God.
Oh, yeah.
Who are you? I mean, we get into the whole thing with Job, you know. I mean, that's almost comical, Larry, isn't it? When Job said, after Job is so faithful, and he was. After he was so faithful, he dared ask the Lord, which seemed reasonable, why do I have to go through that? And then we have, about 4 chapters of the Lord saying, Job, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth?
Right.
I mean, we have no idea what he is. But it did say, though, that he, you know, that the Lord was going to work it out for better, and that he sent Hagar and Ishmael out to be the seed of a great nation. Did it not?
Yep.
But it said that, yes, you will be like a wild donkey. And I believe the NIV says you will get along with no one, and no one will get along with you.
Right. And if you look at the history of the Arabs, there's always been enmity and infighting amongst them, and never been able to unite.
But isn't
But they're going to.
Well,
in the future.
Yes. But the excruciatingly ironic thing is, between the remnant, and I'm not saying Israel's a remnant of the tribes. I mean, I don't know who's what. You know, that's a nation. I understand that there's Jews there, okay.
That gets so complex, I can't even.
Sure.
I can't follow it.
But as far as whoever's true blood, what you really have there is a fight between half brothers and sisters.
Right.
They're all related, and that's probably, I guess, what do they call that? Interesting, the worst kind of warfare that can be.
Right.
And it just seems that it could be so soluble, and yet it never does happen. And we're looking right now also at the stage theater where Netanyahu is basically wagging his finger at Obama. So,
and it's the reason why there's so much hatred toward the Jews in the Arab world and the Muslim world, for that matter, but especially in the Arab world. The hatred is it's way over the top.
I'll say something. I don't mean to trivialize this, but you and I were talking before we came on air that one of my former teammates in the Montreal Expo organization was Gary Carter, and he's got some brain tumors, and that could be rough.
Yeah.
And it made me start thinking about the times that we had when we were back in, my God, I mean, Cocoa Beach. That was horrible. And we got around the swimming pool, and believe it or not, there was a Dominican playing with us by the name of Socrates Santana. How's that? Socrates Santana, yeah, and he came from West 86th Street in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And we would talk and stuff, because, I was a city guy, and he was a city guy. And he would talk about the Haitians. Now, you know where that goes back to, right? Hispaniola?
Yeah.
Between the two of them. I said, because he talked about the fights they had. I mean, they brought the whole thing to Manhattan. And I said to Sock, Sock, why do you hate the Haitians so much? And he sat there, and he took a couple of seconds, and he kind of screwed his face up like he wasn't really sure. And he came out with, because they hate us. But you see, that's the truth, though.
Yeah.
It comes down to, we can't remember why we're doing this, but we've been doing it so long. All I know is I hate you because you hate me. And what are we seeing in the Middle East? It's the same thing.
Yeah, and it's gotten so out of hand that it can't be stopped. I mean, the only way that's ever going to be stopped is through divine intervention.
And we know.
I mean, one side will have to wipe the other out,
for
it to stop. And I don't see that happening, but I do see God intervening, and there's going to be a tremendous amount of bloodshed, and it's just coming down the pike. And people that don't believe that, and this thing lately, I was watching the conversation or reports of the conversations between Netanyahu and Obama, and I mean, I have to side with Netanyahu. I think Obama and the proposal that he's making there is absolutely goofy. I mean,
Larry,
to go back to the 67,
Larry, do you think
that's not going to happen?
Yeah, but I mean, again, I got to stop, because do you really believe that came out of his head, or do you believe that's what he was being told? Right.
No, I believe he was being told this.
Yes. And Netanyahu's playing his part, and Obama's playing his part.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's like, okay, where are we going with this, guys, now? What's going to be the sum of this whole thing?
Yeah, it's a dog and pony show for sure. Just as the thing with Osama bin Laden, I just can't buy into that. I think Osama bin Laden was either dead for quite a while, or that they just made up this big scenario so that Obama will look good going into the elections in 2012. He can jump up and say, "Well, look, I got Osama bin Laden. We did something here that nobody else could do.
Let me run something by you, okay? Because I've been corresponding with Victor Thorne about, all the histrionics around the presidential hopefuls.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Muskrat Head, Donald Trump, just.
What is that thing on his head?
I keep thinking of Robin
It
Williams.
flaps.
Yeah. There's a reason why you don't see him in a swimming pool. Why doesn't he go to Cy Sperling?
Oh man, I heard that.
The hair club, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also
I'm bald myself. I've been bald since my 30s, and it's like, man, the worst thing you can do is do that comb over thing where it looks like you've got and if you spray it, you got that surfboard on your head.
Well, it's like he and Don Rickles. You can comb it over, but you can't start in your armpit hair.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Oh, but
With Trump, it's like it's all puffed up too. It's like, dude, if there's just a gust of wind,
yeah, right.
you're gonna look like you've been trapping animals on your head.
No, I'm sure.
I don't know.
He doesn't go out on high wind warning days.
I heard that.
Otherwise, he'll flog himself with that.
He might. I mean, as much money as the guy has, I mean, if you really, he needs to go get some cosmetic surgery and get a transplant there, or get a really good hairpiece or something. But
when you have that
I
much
don't
money,
understand that.
When you have that much money, no one's going to tell him it looks bad.
Yeah, that's exactly
But
right.
Where I want to go with this is now consider this possibility. None of us thought that Trump had a prayer, and whoever comes out early and runs their mouth, they never make it. It's always that it was like Howard Dean, that embarrassing thing he did years ago with the running for the Democratic nomination. It's like, Howard, shut up. Now Trump comes out. Now consider this, and this is what I was writing with Thorne. I'm saying that Trump came out a supposed Republican, and his sole purpose was to come out and get the birth certificate thing settled for Obama, and then he left. Mm-hmm. Think about that.
Yeah, I think it was all the birther thing, because if you think about it, every time I saw Trump or read anything about Trump, he was a one issue. I mean, it was like it was like a broken record over and over again about the birther thing, which I thought was one of the silliest issues possible.
God, yes.
But there was a certain element of the Looney Tune right that just kept wanting to bang on that, and I think they just want to put that to bed. To be honest with you, I have no crystal ball and no way of knowing what's going to happen in 2012, but it sure looks like Obama's going to have a good shot, and I think that he was kind of a stalking horse for Obama in a sense that he put away or tried to put away that whole birther thing.
Oh, no, it's done. So what I'm saying is I don't care what they call him. Since this whole thing is theater, Trump was to come out and get that unearthed and taken care of, and now everybody goes away huffing and puffing, but that's the end of that deal.
Yeah.
And yet, like I said, the first 7 presidents of the United States were never born in the United States.
Yeah, exactly.
And the one president that was born in the United States, and of course the trick thing here is that the first 7 were born in the colonies, not yet states. And then the 8th, Martin Van Buren, this is great. His native tongue was Dutch. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the one guy that's finally born in the United States has to learn English. But we might be coming full circle.
Well, the country was much, much different back then. I mean, there were enclaves of people who only spoke German. I know that for a fact. My ex-wife's, people were persecuted. They were like Mennonites and that sort of thing, and Pennsylvania Dutch, and some of them were Lutheran, but they came over because they were being persecuted in Europe, and they didn't learn the English language for quite a while. They just within their community they only spoke German.
Yeah. So, but as it relates to all this, the Obama situation now has been somewhat taken care of, and I'll just say this: my call is that. Again, I don't care who they put in the Oval Office, but that will tell you the direction the country's going to go in.
Exactly.
Because they'll select the guy best able to send it where it's going to go. My point is that if Jeb Bush doesn't come out, no matter how late, if Jeb Bush doesn't come out, you got Obama for another 4 years, and then I would fully expect
a war.
Well, an FDR kind of economy.
Well, when they want to jack with you domestically, they put in a Republican. When they want to start a war, they put in a Democrat.
And social programs.
Right. Exactly.
And also be heads up on this. I just wrote an article for
when they want to steal your money and really jack with the banking and the economic system, they put in a Republican.
Yeah.
And now they're ready. I think they're really getting ready for a war. I think World War III is just around the corner, and of course that's just an opinion of one guy, but that's the way it looks to me.
Well, at least we'll all be working again. I mean, but I do want to mention this. I don't know if it's going to fly or not. But there's, like I said, I just wrote this article for American Free Press where it may be that to make the budget look better next year, a lot of the stimulus money that was put out there that has not been encumbered is being rescinded and taken back. Now, there's a House Resolution 1 that's up on the Hill now. You can take a look at that. But somebody notified me about this from a southeastern state whose company deals a lot with state and federal contracts. And the money's drying up, and the layoffs have started, and the benefit reductions have begun. And so you have to wonder, if we're going to see an exacerbation of the economy at the end of the third quarter going into the last quarter of our calendar year. But that then begins September, the beginning of the government fiscal year, I believe. I think that's correct.
Well, I think one thing for sure with the situation in Egypt that we were talking about, and I'd like to get back on that subject, but I think a war is in the offing, and that the Muslim Brotherhood is being allowed to and being supported in its struggle to take over the state of Egypt. And I'll explain why that's important from a geostrategic standpoint, if you want.
And by the way, let me just ask you this too. Now, after this wonderful, tremendous victory by the people in so many Arab nations or Muslim nations, if you want to consider Saharan Africa, not necessarily the Middle East, and it's like, so what's going on now? How much are you guys better off now? You're getting bigger checks. What's going on? And
Nothing's going on, really.
And the other thing is, do we forget about Libya?
Yeah.
There's no news about Libya anymore.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Well, what's odd to me is that it seems that we are supporting people that are known to be members of Al-Qaeda in Libya. Isn't that interesting? How Al-Qaeda is supposed to be our enemy, but every time you look around and just look at the history of Al-Qaeda, with Osama bin Laden and the people over in Afghanistan, back in the late 70s, early 80s, the United States is always in league with them.
Well, you're going to love
we use them whenever it's convenient, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, everybody uses everybody. It's a bazaar of horrors.
Yeah, they made a tremendously good scapegoat for our patsies for 9/11, and I don't really want to get into 9/11 today, but I will at some point, briefly. And I really believe that all along they have just been and they are an outgrowth of the Muslim Brotherhood, pure and simple. And the Muslim Brotherhood is part of the New World Order, and they are the Arab Islamic wing, and they provide us with convenient patsies from time to time, as well as they do assassinations and terrorist bombings and so forth.
But that whole situation with Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, I mean, it is so amorphous. It's like trying to grasp at fog.
Right.
Nobody knows what anybody is. Nobody knows when Al-Qaeda ever began. It's just such, a very murky place. But it's used, obviously, to pull the switches for people in the West, especially in the United States. And the one thing I wanted to mention to you is that in this austerity fever now that has caught our government, at a time when they're worrying now about the nasty hangover out of supposedly whacking bin Laden.
Right.
Well, now the Department of Homeland Security is has had its budget cut in half. And isn't this beautiful? And half of the 60 some odd cities. So guess what?
And the borders have still not been secured after 10 years, Viz.
Well,
they're doing nothing. I mean, every so often, whenever an election comes up in Texas, we have Governor Rick Goodhair Perry goes down to. I swear, he had a commercial on television during the election, and it was saying, and it showed him standing on the border, and he's wearing Western clothes, right? And he's got several, guys dressed up, and they're armed to the teeth, and they're standing there looking across the Rio Grande, and he's talking about they're going to stop all this, And Obama became the problem, I mean, don't let it bother you that Bush was president for 8 years and he's Republican. All of a sudden it's the Democrats' fault that we haven't secured the border. Obama's done nothing, but Bush did nothing. They're not going to do anything about it. It's a joke. The first thing you would want to do if you thought you were under terrorist attack and being infiltrated by terrorism or by terrorists would be to stop that coming across the border, to secure your borders. Nothing's being done. It's ridiculous.
Everybody should be watching the movie Machete. I actually bid on that. I thought that it was a real movie when I saw the trailers.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, you kidding me? I mean, that's going to inflame like the whole Southwest. And then I realized, although I don't think it's going to be necessarily divined like that by certain parties of a militant nature, it's a spoof. But oh
yeah, my son showed me. He had a copy of it. We sat here and just laughed our butts off about that.
Yeah, I mean, but when they sold it, I mean, I bid on it. I'm going, oh my God, what are they doing now? And how could De Niro lend
it was a satire. I mean,
it was. And I'm waiting for the other two ones, Machete Kills and Machete Kills Again. Actually, we're laughing, but I don't know. I'm kind of like not laughing. Oh, and by the way, let me ask you this: as we approach the 50-minute mark, are you in the way of this radical weather that's supposed to be blowing west to east?
I don't guess.
I'll take that as a no.
I haven't noticed anything strange.
Well,
I haven't really been keeping up with the weather this weekend, though.
You're probably the last I should ask. Now, here's the other thing: if this weather, this apocalyptic weather, was traveling, traveling through yesterday, there might have been a whole lot more believers in rapture with Harold camping than.
Oh yeah.
Geez.
I love these guys. You know, hey, let's get up on top of the hill and wait for sell all your worldly possessions and.
But camping ran, and I don't know if he does any longer, but he ran a very good ministry that was in the Northeast. It was in New York, and I heard him on the radio, and I used to give him a donation or two every so often.
Yeah.
But I can't, and apparently I missed his first one that was in '94 or something.
Yeah.
We were in the process of moving down to Florida. And I can't believe it. I'm like, guys, we're going to you wear sneakers and go with the hail bop or what,
Yeah.
Oh, man, I can't believe it.
Well, it's like Machiavelli said a long time ago that organized religion is a means of social control and a way to make money. And he's right. I mean, I'm not talking about a genuine spiritual experience of, salvation, but I'm talking about organized religion, and that's what it becomes.
You're right. As soon as it gets institutionalized, religion is a failure. Religion is a failure. I'm 100% with you.
Organized religion is one of the biggest impediments to the progress of mankind. I mean, we were just talking about the Arab-Israeli thing. I mean, it's basically a religious conflict, and it dates back into ancient history. But I mean, there's so much bloodshed and so many social problems that are involved with organized religion.
You see, that's how Harry gets a pass on all this, because he's a minister in the Church of the Subgenius. He believes in Bob.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I always say that I'm a member of the Church of Monday Night Football. When people ask me and they get that look,
Put your hands on the television.
He's a smart ass.
Right. And there may not be any next year, so anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So after I took you on a digression you didn't want to go on.
That's all right.
But cooperated with.
It's your show, man.
Right. If anybody can be a jerk on this show, I can. All right.
That's all right. Oh, we had a few laughs, but I was going to go to a quote here from the think tank Stratfor. Stratfor is a think tank which does a lot of research on, especially on the Middle East and on politics in general. And they have this to say about Egypt and Islamism. Let's consider for a moment what an Islamic Egypt would mean, Islamist Egypt would mean. The Mediterranean, which has been a strategically quiet region, would come to life. The United States would have to reshape its strategy, and Israel would have to refocus its strategic policy. Turkey's renaissance would have to take seriously a new Islamic power in the Mediterranean. Most important, an Islamist Egypt would give dramatic impetus to radical Islam throughout the Arab world. One of the linchpins of American and European policy in the region would be gone in a crucial part of the world. The transformation of Egypt into an Islamist country would be the single most significant event we could imagine in the Islamic world beyond an Iranian bomb. In other words, this is going to be basically a catastrophic event. If you are a Christian, if you are a Jew, if you believe in any democratic principles, if you're opposed to the idea of totalitarianism and opposed to the idea of one world government, this coming about is not good news for you. And that's the way looking at the takeover of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt.
Well, all right, then that would necessarily mean if we're going to start hitting in the Middle East, and I assume we will.
Mm-hmm. It'll take a while, but I think it's coming.
You know, I just wonder on whose side they're going to come down. I guess they would be necessarily opposed to the United States because of the connection with Israel.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But and then you take a look at the very interesting and strange bedfellow we've had with Saudi Arabia, and you never know what to do with them.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think you're going to have two groups, two Islamic groups that are opposed to each other. I think the Saudis, I think what it all amounts to, and it's kind of convoluted, but I think what it all amounts to is needing to start a new crusade. And I think that eventually Europe, Catholic Europe, will come into play too, and I think that there will be military conflict behind that.
The one thing I almost think is for sure, no matter what happens to us in the United States, and I think we're going to get hurt badly, I also think that what is in store, as savagely also for the Middle East and perhaps Islam in general, is they're going to be targets too, and they're going to be genocided.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I don't say that pleasantly, and that's not where I want to go. It's just that I think one of the byproducts of this war, intended byproducts, is going to be an elimination of, quote, that problem, as those people like to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think at the top of the Muslim Brotherhood, they're not Muslims at all. I think they're satanic. And
agreed. Yeah.
And that's the problem. It's the same thing. It's these secret societies which are leading the world into this. I think they all believe in a future which is under a one world government. And I don't think they'll have any problem at all with the beast system. They'll be part of it, and they're leading the Middle East into this into a slaughter. There's going to be another crusade, for lack of a better term. It's being set up. I mean, the Muslims are now and Islamists are making so much trouble in Europe, and there's so much hatred toward them in Europe that they've taken over the traditional role which the Jews used to play of being the scapegoat. And it's going to come down. It's going to take a while, but there is a tremendous amount of not all the people that are opposed to them are racist or whatever, but there's just a tremendous hatred toward Islamism due to the way they have conducted themselves in Europe, and that's going to lead, and that the Roman Catholic Church is going to lead opposition to that.
It's always the case, and it will continue to be the case, just as we saw with this undue attention that the rapture folks were running with,
mm-hmm.
of course, which didn't happen yesterday at 6 o'clock. But you see, that's being held up as the way all religions are. Mm-hmm. All radical elements of any religion, I don't care if it's Buddhist, whatever, Confucianism, or, and the thing is, that's not the way most of the people are. But you can see for yourself. I mean, and I watch it with Ahmadinejad especially, because they're going to become front and center in time. I mean, he and the new Khomeini get everybody all fired up, and they're not going to get a scratch on them. They're just there to get everything worked up. Mm-hmm. And the same thing in this country. You've got the Dominionists who believe that we have to go over and shed blood in the name of Jesus. I can't figure out how that's right, because it wasn't any good in the 1000 AD either. Mm-hmm. But we kind of just refuse to look at what Jesus said and say, look, we're not doing this anymore. Okay, be that as it may.
Well, we wouldn't want to follow what Jesus said. We want to say we're following Jesus, but we want to do what we want to do, and we don't care what he said. And that's really the problem there. And these people that want to go and take over the world in the name of Christ, God doesn't need you to do anything. I mean, the will of God is the will of God, and He does not need you to help Him out. You know, that's what always blows my mind, is human beings who think they can just, you know, well, I'm going to do this because God needs me to. Well, no, He doesn't, you know.
But Larry, don't you see what's happening here too? I mean, you know, I'm dumb as a hod of bricks, and it's okay. But I mean, I understand what I read. I don't want anybody telling me what I read means.
Right.
And I can't understand for anything except Christians sitting in pews and being told what Scripture says instead of looking at it for themselves, going against the majority and saying, wait a second. We're done with that kind of stuff. It was over in the Old Testament. We're not doing it anymore. That's not what Jesus came to bring us. And that whole bit about going ahead and smiting an entire nation because they were like stiff-necked and rebellious, that was during divine law. That's been supplanted by grace in the new covenant. And yet they still want to go hammer and tong into there. And I'm like, how can you do it? If you look at Scripture, how do you get your brain to believe that that's the case? But they're not reading Scripture. They're listening to people tell them what they should think about it, which is like basically about 9/11 also. Okay, those buildings collapsed because they burnt down. Okay, fine. You know, that you didn't see that, but that's what they told you. You saw it. Therefore, that's what you believe.
Therefore, that's what happened, right?
You're going to believe me or your lying eyes. It's the same story. All right.
Well, you know, it amazes me. I can understand how people who are simple-minded could buy into that, but the majority of people know that really isn't the way it is. But they want to believe it, so they do believe it. You know, they suppress their objectivity, they suppress their logic there, and just go, yeah, that's the way it happened, you know, and just go on because they can't deal with the idea that the government allowed it to happen or actually actively took part in it. They just can't. They cannot let that cross their threshold of credibility. You know, they've got to continue to believe this lie, this propaganda that's put out there, because it's very, very uncomfortable if you start using logic.
What I get the sense that people, I mean, in the United States, I mean, most people have a somewhat developed brain.
Mm-hmm.
And yet what happens is that they'll look at something and they won't trust. And when you get into Scripture, I mean, I do believe, I mean, if you rely on the Holy Spirit, you'll get the deal. You'll understand exactly what's going on. But what they do is they look at that and they want to put a cap on it. Then they go out and see what the majority believes. And when they see the majority going a certain way, they just dump whatever that was enlightened in them at the door and go off on another thing. And there'll be no excuse for that, I'm sorry to say. But, you know, I mean, I get a beam in my eye. I understand all that stuff. But come on, folks. I mean, the Scripture was written for us to understand. I'll admit there's some passages that get a little problematic, no doubt about it. But what Christians are doing is they're just going with the majority, just like what, you know, Ibsen and Jeffers talked about. The majority is never right. You people want to go where where the biggest crowd is so you can feel safest. Even if they're leading you down a ravine, you'll go with them because the numbers are big.
Well, you know, you wouldn't want to look foolish.
Well, look at me.
You wouldn't want to be considered a nut, you know.
Larry, look,
yeah.
You're talking to me now. I spent my life looking foolish, and I'm a nut, according to everyone else.
Yeah, I hear you.
But
I used to, you know, at work, I used to talk to people about 9/11 because I was really concerned about it, you know, and I would try to point out certain anomalies that didn't make sense to me, and you know, and people would start looking at me. At first they would get this kind of puzzled look, and then it was like a tree was going out of my head, you know. And I began to realize I'm wasting my time. They don't want to hear this stuff, you know. They don't want to think about it. They want to believe what they heard on CNN or Fox or, you know, one of the alphabet networks. They want to believe the propaganda, and they're going to believe it. And it's not going to do me a lot of good to sit there and try to argue with people about it, you know.
There's a
brother, and I just gave it up.
There's a brother who contacted me, lives up in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And he's come to an awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And he asked about, well, what kind of materials could I use to share with my coworkers and my friends? Mm-hmm. And I asked that I could call him up and talk to him. Because at this stage of my life, after what I've been through, I mean, not that that's bad. It's just that what I've learned through experience, And I'm saying unless people can understand that their government has, on a number of occasions throughout the last century, killed its citizens to advance something, no one's going to believe 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I can sell the Lusitania because people are removed enough from it that they can
Yeah.
say, okay, you know, I can see that. And Pearl Harbor, yep, I can see that. But when you bring it home to 9/11, they're not going to buy that. And I just said to him, you know, you've got to consider the fact that people pretty much don't think everything's working the way it should. But they only rely on the problem being it's the Democrats or the Republicans' fault.
Right.
9/11 and everything else, you got to go back to the fact that our government is not of the Lord. It was not. The word ordained gets played and gets bandied about. Here's the deal: human government is not of God. Period. He asks you to be obedient and not be a problem, more or less, until the time comes when what the government wants flies in the face of what the Lord asks us to do. Just like Jesus, he obeyed everything until the time came when he couldn't do it. And of course, he's up in front of Pilate, and that was, but that had to be. So my only point is that, look, governments are crummy. There's none of them that are good. And
right.
when you get past the fairy tale about all those good Christian guys that they call our founding fathers, which makes me want to hurl, then you realize, look, don't get upset. We were just another business opened for mercantilism. It's all about the money. It's not about the huddled masses yearning to be free.
Right.
And so it's been an interesting dialogue with him. That's the only way you can do it. I mean, you can send out 1,000 Jones videos. It's not going to do much. You got to hit people where they live, and that is, things are not going right. Have you ever wondered why? And then they start thinking. 9/11, and especially as we get into this 10th year, it's going to be a minefield, and I think people should back away from trying to talk sense, because all emotion's going to break loose, and anybody that says anything is going to wind up with a spear through their head. Yeah, I mean, this is not the time to talk about, emotion's going to run high. Of course, it'll only last about 30 days, and everybody go back to business again. So, at any rate...
one of the tactics that is used for anybody who questions 9/11 is trying to use some logic and show where the official government report and what really happened don't jive. They will start saying that you're being disrespectful to the dead and that you're being unpatriotic. And
that's right.
I mean, nothing could be farther from the truth. I mean, you're trying to get to the heart of the matter and find out who actually committed this crime, but that's what they want to label you with.
Well, that's
really cheesy, man. But it's the way it is.
That's the easy kick to the balls.
Yeah, it is.
What I mean? If they can do that and wave the bloody flag, then everybody goes, ooh.
Yeah.
I mean, it is so interesting, manipulation and psychological ops that take place every day. And you realize what you're up against, and it is definitely formidable. There's no two ways about it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but now heading back into Life with the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah, I've got some material here from a book called Dollars for Terror: The United States and Islam by Richard LaBeviere.
Yep, excellent.
It came out in the year 2000. It's a good book, and here's a quote from it. Many times over, American, European, and Arab diplomats and public officials advised me to follow the trail of the dollars of terror. Every time I was brought back to both the official and secret structures of Saudi finance. Every time I stumbled on the fraternity of the Muslim Brothers. Where does the money for this dangerous proselytism come from? Saudi Arabia and other oil monarchies allied with the United States. The greatest world power is fully aware of this development. Indeed, its information agencies have encouraged it. The CIA and its Saudi and Pakistani homologs continue, as of 1999, to sponsor Islamism. And he goes on to say, the history of the fraternity, when he says fraternity, he's talking about the Muslim Brotherhood. The history of the fraternity makes the brothers' concept of the Islamic State clear, a theocratic state of fascistic inspiration. Some of them were fellow travelers of the Nazis and are still trying today to resuscitate the old alliance of Islamism and the swastika. And in the book, he quotes a guy named Mohammed Saeed al-Aswani, and he says, all my research always brings me back to the same point. At the beginning of this process of the perversion of Islam are the Muslim Brothers, an extreme right cult. The history of the Muslim Brothers is infused and fascinated by fascistic ideology, said al-Aswani. Their doctrines, their total, if not totalitarian way of life, takes as a starting point the same obsession with a perfect city on earth in conformity with the celestial city, whose organization and distribution of powers they can discern through the lens of their fantastical reading of the Quran. This fascistic affiliation would crop up in the analyses of several of our interlocutors, in particular that of journalist Eric Rollo, who is a specialist in the Middle East, former French ambassador to Tunisia and Turkey. Well, I think you can see there that they're talking about the Muslim Brotherhood being funded by both the United States and actually the United States allowing Saudi Arabia to fund them. I guess it'd be good at this point to get into a discussion of who the Muslim Brotherhood is with a little more depth. And I think one of the best sources I've found for that is a book called Islam Under the Swastika, the Grand Mufti and the Nazi Protectorate of Bosnia-Herzegovina by Carl Savage. And he starts talking about the development of the Muslim Brotherhood. Hassan al-Banna formed the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt in 1928. The Muslim Brotherhood had links to the Grand Mufti and worked with him in Palestine, sending volunteers in support of the Palestinian uprising. The Muslim Brotherhood sought to establish Muslim states based on the Sharia, or Islamic law, and the Caliphate system of political rule, wherein each Islamic state will be ruled by a caliph. Islam is creed and state, book and sword, and a way of life, is what Hassan al-Banna said. In Pakistan, Syed Abdul al-Mauludi founded the Jamaat Islami movement with the goal of establishing Muslim theocratic states based on Quranic law. Egyptian Syed Qutb of the Muslim Brotherhood continued the movement after World War II. The Muslim Brotherhood had offshoots, the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, and Hamas. Hajj Amin el-Husseini, the Muslim Brotherhood, Jamaat Islami, Islamic Jihad, all form the roots and historical background for the emergence of the Al-Qaeda network, the Mujahideen of Afghanistan, and Osama bin Laden. Ayatollah Khomeini and Bosnian Muslim leader Izetbegovic would be influenced by the anti-secular, anti-Western, radical Muslim nationalist movements. Yasser Arafat was introduced to the Mufti, and the Mufti would subsequently become the role model and mentor for Arafat. In biographies of Arafat, whose real name is Mohammed el-Husseini, the Mufti is stated to be a distant relative of Arafat, although this claim has been denied as well. For 2 years, beginning at the age of 16, Arafat worked for the Mufti, and his covert terrorist network and organization helped to smuggle and buy weapons in the war against the Jewish settlers in Palestine. Sheikh Hassan al-Abu Saud, the Mufti al-Sharafaria, worked with the Mufti. The Grand Mufti was a precursor of both the Palestinian Liberation Organization and of the Palestinian national struggle and movement to maintain a Palestinian state. The terrorism, fanaticism, and ruthlessness of that movement reflect the enduring legacy and influence of the Grand Mufti. I'd like to read something from a book by a man that you're familiar with, John Roy Carlson.
Mm-hmm.
Carlson wrote another book dealing with Nazism, but in this case, it was his travels into the Middle East. Carlson is an Armenian. His family, I don't think he's still alive, but he was an Armenian. His family immigrated from Armenia to the United States in the aftermath of World War I. The reason for that being that the tremendous persecution and slaughter of the Armenians by the Ottoman Empire, and also persecution from other elements in Europe. But he had always been interested in the Middle East, and he infiltrated into some of the Islamic groups over there. And he had an interview with Hassan al-Banna, and here's a quote from him in his book.
Larry, before you start, do you have a year on that book?
1951.
All right, so that is after he wrote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The book.
Undercover. Yeah.
The book takes place. It's based on his travels and his interviews and his observations from 1947 to 1951, and he published it in 1951. In fact, it's online. I don't know exactly how to get to it, but
all right, I'll check it out and see if I can put it up.
Yeah. You can get to it online.
Because Undercover's online too. I just never realized he did that. That's a good find. When did you come up with that, by the way?
I just kind of stumbled across it. I think it was probably vestiges of my days when I used to use Dave Emery's website. Not a big. I know you're not a big fan. Neither am I really, but
that's all right. I mean, what is good is good. I mean, but you've had this in for a number of years then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he says here, he, Hassan el-Banna, the Murshid or Supreme Guide, also had a special assassin squad entrusted with the duty of liquidating political opponents. El-Banna resented a verdict that Judge Ahmed el-Khazindar Bey meted out against a Muslim brother and ordered him liquidated. One of the Murshid's henchmen took care of this assignment, aided by an assistant who pumped 6 bullets into the judge. Under public pressure, Cairo's police chief staged a few raids and made a few arrests. El-Banna was annoyed. He ordered his terror squad to teach the police chief a lesson, and the latter was promptly killed by a hand grenade while on a tour of inspection of Fuad University. When the president of Fuad complained, he was denounced as a European and publicly insulted and narrowly missed being shot. El-Banna played for high stakes. Not content with liquidating a judge and a police chief, he ordered Abdul Majid Aman Hassan, a 23-year-old student and a member of his terror squad, to carry out his duty to Allah. A religious sheikh told Hassan that the Quran sanctioned the murders of the enemies of Islam and of Arabism, whereupon Hassan dutifully swore to kill any traitor the Murshid named. Hassan retired and spent his days in meditation, prayer, and preparation. On the 10th day after his oath, he donned a policeman's uniform and went to the Ministry of Interior, where he waited for the Egyptian Prime Minister Mahmoud Fahmy el-Nakrashi Pasha to emerge. As soon as Nakrashi Pasha appeared, followed by his bodyguard, Abdel whipped out a pistol and shot the minister dead. His duty to the Murshid and to Allah fulfilled, his place in heaven assured. A little sarcasm there from Carlson. Yeah, the book, Cairo to Damascus, was really kind of an eye-opener to me. And what's really stunning about it is this book was written literally 60 years ago, and the same elements are around in Egypt and are now about to take over. And what's really scary is that in the West, and especially through the New York Times, they're feeding us this propaganda that the Muslim Brotherhood is really just an organization that used to be violent, but now they've eschewed violence, and they're really nice people. And there was an article in the New York Times by Tariq Ramadan, who was the grandson of Hassan al-Banna. He's kind of Tariq Ramadan is kind of like the darling of the liberals. They bring him on whenever they want to talk about, Islam and its influences and what the Muslim Brotherhood is all about. So they brought him on to write an article called "Whither the Muslim Brotherhood." It was in New York Times on February 8, 2011. And he writes here, it's totally a lie. The Muslim Brothers began in the 1930s as a legalist, anti-colonialist, and non-violent movement that claimed legitimacy for armed resistance to Palestine against Zionist expansion during the period before World War II. The writings from between 1930 and 1945 of Hassan al-Banna, founder of the Brotherhood, showed that he opposed colonialism and strongly criticized the fascist governments in Germany and Italy. He rejected the use of violence in Egypt, even though he considered it legitimate in Palestine in resistance to the Zionist Stern and Ergun terror gangs. Today's Muslim Brotherhood draws these diverse visions together, but the leadership of the movement, those who belong to the founding generation, are now very old, no longer fully represent the aspiration of the younger members who are much more open to the world, anxious to bring about internal reform, and fascinated by the Turkish example. Behind the unified hierarchical facade, contradictory influences are at work. No one can tell which way the movement will go. Well, I know which way the movement's going to go because you lied about their commitment to violence. They're going to do everything they can to take over Egypt, and they probably will. And at that point, they're going to do everything they can to start a major war by attacking Israel. That's just a little editorializing.
Well, no, I mean, it's interesting that we had this hubbub between Netanyahu and Obama. That when everything's died down, something has to happen to get them all fired up again. And so here we are. So now this is going to have some kind of currency. We'll see how this works out. But it's just to keep everything out there and this continuing debate and friction going. When everything's died down and you don't hear a lot of it, something has to happen to get it back front and center of what's going on. You know, and by the way, isn't it interesting though? We don't hear a thing about North Korea.
No.
You know what I mean?
Nothing.
And actually, we're not really hearing a whole lot about Iran either. It's, and then they'll bring that back out and rotate this stuff.
Well, what Iran is doing right now is they're quietly making an alliance with Egypt. I had an article. I don't have it with me right now, but recently Iran has made overtures to Egypt. They want to align themselves with them. And if that happens, you've got the two most powerful states in the Middle East aligned together as radical Islamic states.
Right.
And that's scary.
Does this have something to do with apparently backdooring weapons through this crazy pipeline, if it's really true, that goes to Venezuela with Chavez? Have you heard anything about this?
I don't know anything about that,
Right.
Viz. I do know that there have been shipments of weaponry going to Hezbollah from Iran that have been interdicted by the Israelis. And I do know that there are estimates now by people who keep up with that sort of thing saying that they believe that Hezbollah now has something along the order of 60,000 rockets that they can use against Israel, and that now they have some with warheads that have chemical and biological weapons.
Oh, here we go with the bioweapons again. All right.
Yeah. I'd like to talk about one of the most famous members of the Muslim Brotherhood, who was the Palestinian leader, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, who was one of the most evil men in the history of the world, as far as I'm concerned. Talk a little bit about his background. He was born in 1893 in Jerusalem when it was under Ottoman rule. He swore allegiance to the Ottoman Empire during the Armenian genocide, and he was an officer stationed in Smyrna, and he participated firsthand in the Armenian genocide. They estimate that anywhere from 1 million to 1.5 million Christians were slaughtered under the sword of the Islamic Jihad by the Ottoman army. A lot of people died as a result of starvation. They were brutally treated by the Ottoman Empire, and Husseini was an officer in the Ottoman army, the Turkish army. Here's from a book called Islam Under the Swastika, the Grand Mufti and the Protectorate by Carl Savage again. Hajj Amin al-Husseini arrived in Europe in 1941 following the unsuccessful pro-Nazi coup which he organized in Iraq. He met German Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop and was officially received by Adolf Hitler on November 28, 1941 in Berlin. Nazi Germany established for the Gross Mufti Jerusalem a bureau from which he organized the following: radio propaganda on behalf of Nazi Germany, espionage and fifth column activities in Muslim regions of Europe and the Middle East, and the formation of Muslim Waffen-SS and Wehrmacht units in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Kosovo, Western Macedonia, North Africa, and Nazi-occupied areas of the Soviet Union, and the formation of schools and training centers for Muslim imams and mullahs who would accompany the Muslim SS and Wehrmacht units. As soon as he arrived in Europe, the Mufti established close contacts with Bosnian Muslim and Albanian Muslim leaders. He would spend the remainder of the war organizing and rallying Muslims in support of Nazi Germany. In 1939, the Mufti established his headquarters in Baghdad, Iraq, where he set up a political department that maintained ties to Germany and Italy. Germany sought to create a Berlin-Baghdad axis and instigated a pro-Nazi coup. Iraqi General Rashid Ali Galani, a militant Muslim nationalist, and the Golden Square, a group of pro-Nazi Iraqi officers, took over the Iraqi government. The Mufti sent representatives to Berlin in a letter to Adolf Hitler. In a reply by German State Secretary Freiherr von Weizsäcker, the Mufti was told that the Fuhrer received your letter dated January 20th. He took great interest in what you wrote him about the national struggle of the Arabs. Germany is ready to cooperate with you and give you all possible military and financial help. Germany is prepared to deliver to you immediately military material. Abwehr German intelligence established contacts with the Mufti at this time. Nazi Germany sent arms and aircraft to the Mufti's forces in Iraq, but the British were able to reoccupy Iraq, forcing the Mufti and al-Galani to flee to Tehran. The Muftis then flew to either Afghanistan or Turkey, where he is known to have friends. From there, he arrived in Albania, and on October 24th, he reached southern Italy. On October 27, 1941, the Mufti arrived in Rome. The Mufti would subsequently play a major role in organizing Muslim support for Nazism in Europe. Well, that kind of gives you a rundown of who the Grand Mufti was, and he survived World War II and continued to be a force for Islamic jihad, for Islamism in Egypt long after that. And lastly, I'd like to talk about the Middle East after World War II and the influence of the Mufti there briefly, and show what happened after the Second World War. And when the war ended, Mufti Haj Amin al-Husseini returned to the Middle East as a hero. This is coming from an article cited in Wikipedia, but anyway. On October 1st, 1948, he was proclaimed the president of the government of all Palestine. The government was, however, fictional because it did not control any land and was recognized by only a handful of Arab nations. In 1959, the, quote, government was disbanded by its sponsor, Egypt. During World War II, the Grand Mufti became one of the greatest propagandists for the Nazi Revolution. According to Sami al-Jondi, one of the original founders of the ruling Ba'ath Party in Syria, I might point out the Ba'ath Party is essentially a fascist party. Sami al-Jondi Husseini, he wrote, "We admired the Nazis. We were immersed in reading Nazi literature and books. We were the first who thought of a translation of Mein Kampf. Anyone who lived in Damascus at that time was witness to the Arab Revolution, Arab inclination toward Nazism, and influenced the Arab Revolution," recalled Sami al-Jondi, one of the founders of the Ba'ath Party. The sentiments, this is from an article titled "The Arab/Nazi Muslim Connection" in an Israeli website. It was written by John Gunther. The sentiments of Hitler then and today were dramatized well in a pop folk song in the Middle East during World War II, in a song which began, "Bisama Allah, Oriya Alard Hitler." In heaven, Allah, on earth, Hitler. This theme became a cultic slogan as posters were placed in the Arab markets, and even a book was printed, "In heaven, Allah is thy ruler, on earth, Adolf Hitler." And that's from John Guthrie, and he also wrote, "The greatest contemporary Arab hero is probably Hitler." Jeez. And again from Dr. Mock, Robert Mock, "Also with the Nazis, the Islamic Brethren became the fifth parliament whose secret army resided on Egypt's soil. When the forces of General Rommel and the Africa Corps came within 60 miles of Alexandria, heading to the gates of Cairo, it was a duty of the Muslim Brotherhood to prepare for an anti-British uprising in Cairo. The leaders of this revolt were the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hassan al-Banna, and the future presidents of Egypt, Gamal Nasser and Anwar Sadat. They were to assure that no American or English would be left alive in either Cairo or Alexandria. When Rommel's drive into Egypt failed, Sadat, who had drawn up a treaty with Germany with the desire to create a pro-Axis Egypt, was arrested and spent the remainder of the war in prison."
Sadat spent the rest of the war in prison?
Yeah.
Do you know who bagged him? I mean, was it the Brits or?
I would assume, I would assume it was the British.
Let me ask you at this juncture, too. I mean, this whole bit about the Arabs, I mean, like as you said, I mean, on Earth it's Hitler. I got to believe that isn't driven by some kind of like love of his political ideology. I got to believe that it's got something to do with the fact that, okay, you hate Jews, so do we. We're together.
Yeah.
Or is that unfair? I don't know.
There are many Arabs. I've read statements by people who, in the Arab world, who say the only problem that they had with Hitler was that he didn't finish the job, that he didn't do well enough. He didn't get rid of all the Jews. In other words, that was his only failing. They liked him otherwise. Mm-hmm. Another thing about it was that they liked Germany and in particular Hitler because this was the only major European power, as opposed to England and France, who had colonized that area of the world. The Germans had never done that, although they did want to, but they hadn't done it, and as a result, that gave them some brownie points with the people in the Middle East. Because
they were seen as not being interlopers like the French and the Brits.
Right,
okay.
Right.
All right. And I guess whatever interaction there had been, and of course there certainly had to be between the Germans and the Ottomans, mm-hmm. It seemed to be obviously very pro and advantageous to the Ottomans.
Exactly.
Okay, so they weren't taking more than they gave, which is probably why there was that propinquity between the Ottomans and Germany.
Right.
Whereas the Brits, where's the oil? And the French, where's the oil? So, I mean, but isn't it interesting, though? I mean, when you think about it, the Brits go down there, get oil rich. The French went down there and got oil rich. And the Germans like, I don't know. We have synthetic oil, but we won't tell anybody. That's another great story about what, all right. Sorry. But this stuff, I mean...
Not a problem. It's your show.
That's another way of saying shut up. All right. I'll take that as a yes. All right. I'm done. Proceed, please.
Yeah, that's really all I had for this edition.
Thank God.
I had intended to talk about the Nazi influence, and how the CIA had put our good friend Otto Skorzeny down there. There's one other thing.
Okay.
It is a follow-up to a question that you asked me, and I'm trying to answer the questions as best I can. And this was about the Nuremberg trials and whether any of the prosecutors had tried to do anything about, the Nazis getting off easy, and if, people had objected to the way that they were being treated. And in his book, I've been reading a book by John Loftus, mm-hmm. called America's Nazi Secret. And he answers that question more or less about a guy that he once worked for. Said, during the Nuremberg trials, one of the prosecuting attorneys, the same Walter J. Rockler, who later became my boss at OSI, discovered a German document listing the 13 American banks that had secretly worked for the Third Reich during World War II. After his investigative unit was shut down, Rockler kept the Nazi bank list to prevent it from being shredded. The German bankers that Rockler was trying to prosecute at Nuremberg had hired American and British corporate executives who had then become the secret resident of Camp Ashbin, or Ashcan Dustbin. It was the Special Assistant Attorney General Victor Swearingen who had kept all the American and British moneymen hidden from the nosy Nuremberg prosecutors. Political smear tactics forced Rockler out before I could tell him why all Nazi financial crime investigations kept getting closed down. He was getting too close to the truth. The money that funded the banks and corporations of the Third Reich came from Wall Street and the City of London, England's financial district and Wall Street equivalent. Roosevelt knew about it, and so did his Secretary of the Treasury, Henry Morgenthau. The Special Assistant Attorney General of the United States, Victor Swearingen, closed all of the treason cases in occupied Germany. Not a single corporate officer ever went to jail for doing business with the Nazis, either in America or the United Kingdom. The Justice Department covered it all up. More than 100 American traitors were returned home after many profitable years of serving Hitler. The Army's original investigative files, codenamed Ashcan and Dustbin, are still off limit to protect the privacy of the American citizens involved. I guess so. Then he talks about Kissinger. Kissinger was recruited as a professional spy for Dulles shortly after the end of the war in Europe. Although there's no evidence that he personally recruited Nazis, Kissinger ran the intelligence file room where records of Nazi recruitments were kept. He then transferred to Harvard, where he specialized in recruiting foreign students for espionage. Later, he worked for Dulles during the glory days of the Office of Policy Coordination. He was hired by a private group known as Operations Research Office, which planned to use former Nazis as agents behind Russian lines in the event of World War III. Mention of Kissinger's classified work was censored from the original manuscript of this book. The unpublished memoirs of a senior SS officer, Frederick Burkhardt, who had written a history of the Nazi occupation of Eastern Europe. In it, excuse me, I didn't read that one quite right. There's a Professor Dahlin that he had gotten the records from. He had to go in and seize the records. And he said he had the unpublished memoirs of a senior SS officer, Frederick Burkhardt. Dahlin had plagiarized Burkhardt's manuscript for his own famous work, Russia Under German Rule. Burkhardt had been the leader of Vorkommando Moscow, one of the SS mobile killing units, which specialized in recruiting local collaborators from Belarus and the Ukraine as spies. At any rate, it's an excellent book. I recommend anybody reading it. It's called America's Nazi Secret by John Loftus. And in it, Loftus kind of summarizes a lot of his other work, and it's really a good summary. And in it, he explained what was going on at Nuremberg. This would give me a good jumping-off point to start on the story of Otto Skorzeny. Otto Skorzeny was a famous German officer, SS officer, and he was the leader of the bunch of bastards who bushwhacked the United States Army at the Battle of the Bulge by dressing up as American soldiers and misrouting convoys and shooting Americans in the back. And also, he and his friends were the people that were responsible for having Americans rounded up and having their hands tied and then shot to death. This was his handiwork. Mm-hmm. He was a leader of that particular group, a real dyed-in-the-wool Nazi SOB, and I just wish that the Texas Rangers had been there at Nuremberg, because they would have known what to do with that sucker, and strung him up from the highest tree and put a sign on him to murderer and bushwhacker. And other than that,
yeah, you sound like Lonesome Dove.
Yeah. Sometimes, I really, that's kind of somewhere in the bloodline, and it's like just kind of down deep in my soul. I see things like this where, justice should be done to someone like that. And he was allowed to get away with what he did. Mm-hmm. It's disgusting, but that's the way it is.
I could take the high ground, and I really won't, but it is true nevertheless. Everyone gets their due in time. It's just that we'd like to see it happen before our eyes.
Yeah.
And that's something that we're not guaranteed. But
right.
These creeps, again, all this is their kingdom, this is their time. Mm-hmm. Man, eternity is forever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not going to be pretty.
No, it's not. Not for them.
No, and I mean, the idea of revenge makes sense to us. Actually, it does. And yet we're told not to. But boy, I'll tell you, it's a stretch when you work with these kind of creeps.
Yeah.
But, we're seeing that now. We're seeing that even today. And it's never going to end. It's going to even get more intense.
Oh, yeah.
And it's true. I mean, I hate to say it, but, the Lord warned us. You want to live by the sword, you die by the sword.
Yeah.
And, that's a fate that I think we probably would like to just escape. But, yeah, I mean, I'm with you. The sentiments to take somebody upside the head is great.
Yeah. There are times when it just that seems to be warranted. I would point out to the audience that one thing that's really frightening right now, as far as Egypt and the Muslim Brotherhood, is that there is recently a spate of killings by Muslims killing Christians, Coptic Christians there. Recently, I think within last month, there was a situation outside a church in Cairo where Coptic Christians were having services, and a riot broke out, and 12 Coptic Christians wound up being killed. This is the fruit of that kind of philosophy and belief system, and I think you're going to see a lot more of that. And what I'm trying to point out is these people don't just hate Jews. They hate Christians just as much. And this is the beginning of some really serious confrontations, I believe, in the Middle East and maybe even in this country.
When you look at, if you want to call it the three religions, at the root of all of it is not really violence. I mean, they play up the Islamic thing, but honestly, I don't see it really being part and parcel, be that as it may. Mm-hmm. But what you just said brings home the fact that we live in a country, and the one good thing on this plantation, where no one necessarily right now is killing us for our beliefs.
Right.
We are wont to forget, very much so, that those who are Christians do it at a price that we have no idea what they risk. And what you just said just brings it home chillingly. It's that we can worship for nothing. They do it at the cost of their life. Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Right. They're only about 10% of the population, and they're one of the most ancient Christian groups. I guess you'd call it a sect, but the Coptic Christians date back, basically to the time of Christ.
That's right. That's right. All right. We'll pick it up with another massive part of this whole history, and that's Scorsese, and as it also relates to Hitler, and now we're getting a little bit more into the middle of the 20th century.